Hello and welcome to a very special crossover episode here on the Field of 68. My name is Rob Dosser. I am the Yukon guy, and I'm joined by our Gonzaga guy, none other than Dan Dickau, live there from Spokane. We have a big game on Saturday night, Dan, in Madison Square Garden. UConn is taking on the Zags. It's been a fun rivalry over the years between the two programs, and I do think that this is we'll get into why in a little bit, but I do think that this is going to be a year where it's Gonzaga's turn to kind of assert their dominance a little bit in this game. First and foremost, man, it's good to see you. How you doing?
Yeah, things are good. That's for sure. Thanksgiving's in the rearview mirror. It's hard to believe that's like 2 weeks away or 2 weeks ago, and Christmas is right around the corner. But that non-conference slate of games, feast week up until right before a lot of schools go on their mini Christmas break.
Mhm.
There's some really good games. This being one of them. So yeah, I'm looking forward to talking through it a little bit more because a couple weeks ago on one of the regional broadcasts I had for the Gonzaga games, I made the comment, if all goes well for Gonzaga and all goes well for UConn, we could be talking about a 1 versus 2 matchup at Madison Square Garden, which would have been, one of those legendary type matchups that people remember for a number of years. And unfortunately, it's not that. Gonzaga let one slide in the Bahamas. They let one slide against Kentucky last weekend in Seattle. And then we all know about, I don't want to call it a debacle, but just the struggles of UConn in Maui. I'd like to hear your description on that. But,
I blacked
that
it
being
out, man. I have
said,
no idea what you're talking about. Did they go to Hawaii? What happened? There was a Maui Invitational.
yeah, for sure. It's still going to be a heck of a basketball game. I think Coach Few and Coach Hurley are clearly two of the best at what they do in college basketball. I think UConn, just from an outsider perspective, not watching it as closely as you do with that program, they've got a lot of really good pieces, but they're still searching for some stuff. I think obviously you're going to miss Donovan Clingan and Tristan Newton, right? But I think the guy that they're missing more than anybody is Cam Spencer. Just kind of that glue guy that you're going to get 8 to 12, but he can occasionally get you 24 with six made threes and completely change the dynamic of the game. That's my quick overview take. I know we'll break it down a little bit more, but I'd love to hear your piece.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is they lost a lot of that veteran presence, right? Like you went from being a team that had two fifth-year senior guards that were both drafted second round of the NBA. Two guys, one was a first team All American, the other was first team All Big East, that could shoot, pass, defend, play off the bounce, play off of screens, play off of ball screens. They could do it all. And what you've replaced them with is a fifth year senior in Hassan Diarra, who's a good player, but probably at his best as like the change of pace guy off the bench, right? And a solo ball kid who is he's smaller than those guys. He's really athletic. He's a lights out shooter. You cannot let him get going, but he hasn't quite figured out the positional stuff defensively, right? Like he jumps at a pump fake, or he bites on a jab step, or he doesn't take the right angle getting over a screen, and it's little things like that that don't get erased when you don't have Donovan Clingan at the rim. And I think that what's all kind of built up. I think what happened in Maui was, and I'm sure you've seen this before, right? You've seen Gonzaga in Maui. You've played and worked with some of these teams that go through these events. When you have 3 games in 3 days, if one thing goes wrong, you can't fix that in between, right? You can't go out and try to solve what is ailing you when you have to go prepare for a game in 21 hours. Like you can do a shoot around, you can't get a practice, you can't work some of these things out. And I think that it kind of snowballed on them to the point where once you got to the Dayton game, they had no confidence. Like you could just see the body language, you could see it in them that was not a UConn basketball team that we've seen. And you come home, you got a week before you play a real game against Baylor. They were able to figure some things out against Baylor. You go down to Texas. Their best half of the season was the first half at Texas. They looked like UConn basketball again for the first time. Better defensively, executed their stuff offensively. To me, the key in this game, and I'll give it back to you here. UConn's got to be able to stop Gonzaga. We have two of the top 3 offenses in college basketball facing off
Yeah.
in the Garden. Points are going to be scored. It's whoever can get the most stops, and I'm very worried about how UConn is going to be able to slow down this Gonzaga offense, because when they get going, man, you don't have a prayer.
Excuse me. Well, to touch on that 3 games in 3 days, I know there's some coaches that are really hesitant about moving forward with these just because of the reasons that you mentioned. But I personally, as a former player, someone who follows the game closely, I like it. And I think the reason I like it is you get to see who has that grit and who has that toughness individually and what teams have that collectively. And I'm not saying UConn doesn't have that, or I'm not saying that they're not going to find that this year. But a lot of times you have to revert back to your competitiveness. Like, we don't scout this team as much as we would have with 48 hours of prep. I just got to go out and figure it out on the fly. You have to rely upon the principles, the concepts that now in college basketball you've been able to work on since the summer. And so for that reason, I like 3 games in 3 days because you can, as a fan, you can see what players are made of. I would think from a coach's perspective, and I know Danny Hurley mentioned he didn't like it. He doesn't plan on doing any more 3 in 3 days. I would think he would like that too, just because he is such a fundamental based, big picture coach that if we've been teaching you this for 6 months and you don't do it, why? Right? And then challenge the guys to be able to do it. So those kind of comments were a little bit disappointing for me to hear. And Danny Hurley is not the only one that said that. So I don't like going away from that format because it's been good for college basketball for so long. But I think, with some of these newer events, the Players Era in Vegas for the NIL jackpot, whatever you want to call it, it's changing the game a little bit, and it's going to be unique to see over the next 2-3 years how those traditional ones continue to evolve. Do they take a day off for the reasons that we just mentioned? Do they have to add some type of NIL component? I don't know, but I had a San Diego State game earlier this year and was going through the schedule with Brian Dutcher, and he said, "Look, this Players Era event is going to be phenomenal for us. We get 2 games in 2 days, and then we go home for 36 hours, have Thanksgiving in our homes or with a team function in San Diego, and then fly right back on Southwest to play our last game." So, that's a unique thing. And granted, San Diego State geographically can do that because it's like a 50-minute flight on Southwest. There's no way UConn could have done that if it was a 2 days off in Maui and going back across the country. But I think those are lots of things to think about. And I know we kind of went off subject a little bit there, but, I think what you learn in their 3 days, they didn't get things done in game one. They had a terrific response against Indiana, and then a Davidson team who runs a lot of complex offensive actions. You had to be really good defensively, which I think they were that day, with your concepts. If there's split actions, you got to stay underneath. If it's ball screens, you got to understand your coverages. And those are all things that honestly aren't worked on the day before a game or the morning of a shoot around. They're just re-emphasized those days. And so that's one of the reasons I do like the 3 games in 3 days, because you see what has stuck with your players through the long haul.
Mm-hmm. All right. Let's and I agree with a lot of that as well. Let's talk about this specific matchup. Gonzaga, UConn. I think if I'm a UConn fan, where I'm the most worried is what they can do in the post, right? Graham Ike is averaging 15 a game. Braden Huff is averaging 12 a game. Ben Gregg's averaging 10 a game. You have 3 big guys that are all double-figure scorers that can all draw fouls, that are all like you throw the ball in the block, all 3 of those guys are getting a bucket or drawing a foul, right? Terrace Reed, Samson Johnson, the biggest issue they've had is foul trouble. To me, that's where I see Gonzaga's single biggest advantage is running stuff through the post. And we know Mark Few loves running stuff through the post.
Yeah, no, you're spot on with that. I mean, granted, Gonzaga plays at one of the faster tempos in the country, and they've got a point guard in Ryan Nembhard who's fantastic at that.
So
but
good, man. He is so good.
Yeah, he's been, like 6.5 to 1 assist to turnover ratio. Those are like unheard of type numbers. I mean, most point guards, if you're at 2.5 to 1, you're getting a lot of praise from your coach, and he's nearly tripling that. But Gonzaga, yes, they want to go inside out. And regardless of when they've had great point guards, and Nembhard's one of them, they want to establish the interior first, put foul pressure on the defense, get some easy early buckets, make you now have to read and react. Do I double? Do I dig down? What type of covers do I play? And then you start bringing in the ball screens where now hopefully that big is scored on the low block or on a duck in or something. Now you start bringing in the ball screens now because they've got mobile bigs who can score in that short roll type situation or make decisions out of it. Now you start getting them the ball in those areas. And so now defensively, you're having to guard a guy on the move as opposed to stationary on the block and fighting it. They really emphasize getting the ball to the post in so many different ways. It's hard to prepare for. And you're right; those three guys put a ton of foul pressure on opposing bigs, and in different ways. Because Braden Huff, he's going to stretch you, so you're worried about that. And then EK is a monster at creating contact down low and sealing you deep. And Ben Gregg is, without knowing every roster to a T, he's got to be one of the best on the offensive end of the floor in regards to flying in from the outside, crashing the offensive glass when there's an opportunity, putting foul pressure on that way.
Yeah, and that's the other part of this matchup as well, is that Gonzaga, there's going to be a lot of times where they're playing two bigs together, right? Where you have essentially a 4-man and a 5-man that are both throwbacks, if that makes sense. Where UConn's going to have, Alex Caravan played 39 minutes at the 4 in their last game at Texas. I think that's something where beyond just the foul trouble, it's who kind of wins that, right? Is it something where Caravan can take advantage of the fact that you got Ben Gregg on him and can get to the basket on him, or he's running off of those pin downs and Gregg can't chase him off of the 3-point line? Or is it a situation where you got EK and Huff out there together sometimes and you throw the ball into Huff and now you got Alex Caravan trying to guard somebody? I think that, to me, it's everyone's going to talk about the guards. Everyone's going to talk about Ryan Nembhard because he's in the mix for like legitimately first team All-American right now. But to me, it's the matchup of the front lines. Can UConn stay out of foul trouble? What happens with that matchup at the 4? What is Graham Ike going to end up? Like, that's where this game is going to be won or lost with the 4 and the 5.
Yeah, and we haven't even touched on Michael Ajayi. He came in with incredibly high expectations, having led the WCC at Pepperdine last year in scoring, second and rebounding. He's kind of struggled to find his way at times, but he's Gonzaga's best NBA prospect just because of his versatility, his length, his doing of so many different things that can impact winning. Now, the average fan are going to look and say, hey, he's not scoring it the way he could, or he's not shooting it from the 3-point line like he did last year. Well, it was limited attempts from the 3-point line. And the offense was completely run through him the majority of the year at Pepperdine. He's still finding his way and figuring out where his opportunities come. But in regards to you talking about Caravan, that's the guy right there that I think matches up perfectly because he's agile enough as a wing when Caravan runs off those doubles that he can fight through it a little bit more, probably better than Gregg and Huff. But then he's got the size that a lot of times Caravan takes advantage of against wings and takes you down low or gets you on the offensive glass. Ajayi's got the size and length and strength to kind of be able to battle that. So you're right. I think that Caravan, whoever matches up with him, is a key component to who figures out this game and who wins this game.
If you haven't heard by now, we have partnered with BetMGM Sportsbook. We're going to be using BetMGM lines to make all of our picks, and we'll have special offers for the listeners and the viewers of the Field of 68 throughout the year. If you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, you can use bonus code FIELD, and you will get up to a $1,500 first bet offer on your first wager with BetMGM. The best part, all you need to do is deposit and bet $10 of your own hard-earned money to be eligible. Here's how you make it work. Download the BetMGM app and sign up using that bonus code FIELD. Deposit at least $10 and place your first wager on any game, and you will receive up to $1,500 in bonus bets if your bet loses. Just make sure that you use that bonus code FIELD when you sign up. BetMGM is going to have some fun offers available throughout the NBA playoffs. Bet insurance tokens, odds boost, and what I love, a nice parlay boost or two from time to time, as well as a ridiculous array of player prop bets for any any sport that you could possibly imagine betting on. BetMGM is and always will be the king of the prop bet. So go download the BetMGM app, use the bonus code FIELD, and sign up today. And while I've got you, a quick request. The best way to support the Field of 68 content that you get for free is to engage with us. Rate and review the podcast. Like and share the YouTube videos. Tell your friends about us. It all helps in a world where the algorithm is king. And now, back to the show. Now that the college basketball season is in full swing, you need to make sure that you have access to the best betting tool on the market, the Rhythm app. Spelled RITHMM, is a data-backed app that uses AI and analytics to identify inefficiencies in betting lines and the player prop market that will allow you, the user, to profit. You can create customized, analytics-driven betting models tailored to your personal preferences as a bettor. Users have access to up-to-the-second against the spread data. And if you're like me and you understand pictures better than numbers on a screen, Rhythm's internal trend analysis provides you with the kind of graphs that will allow you to evaluate past results and project future performance in a visual way. Every Division I college basketball team is included in the Rhythm's metrics. Free subscribers to the Field of 68 Daily will get 25% off for a Rhythm subscription. Use the QR code on the screen to sign up or download at the link in the description. How do you stop Ryan Nembhard? How do you do it? Is it possible?
Well, I think BYU showed something in the second half that I think a lot of teams are going to.
Kentucky. You got your Mark Pope coach.
Yeah, sorry. In the Kentucky game. Who did I say? Did I say UConn?
You said BYU.
BYU. Well, I'm thinking Mark Pope. That's why I was thinking BYU. Because, Mark Pope was not afraid to change things up at times at BYU, and he definitely changed it up in that second half. And I think when you look at that first half, Nembhard was able to get into a flow, throw it ahead in transition, probe in transition, pick and rolls, get downhill, stretch the big in traps at different times. That second half, Kentucky put on a 1-3-1, and then occasionally they would match up out of it and go back to man after, say, 15 left on the shot clock. They did a number of different things, but that zone didn't allow Nembhard to get in the paint. It didn't allow to get him downhill in pick and rolls, because you can screen against the zone. You can set pick and rolls against the zone, but you got to move those secondary defenders so that they're not truly just locked in on the ball. And I think that's something that other teams are going to try, whether it's a 1-3-1, whether it's a 2-3 matchup, a gimmick 1-2-2, who knows? But I think you're going to see that a little bit throughout the course of the year. Now, I know Danny Hurley's not a big zone coach, so I don't think we're going to see it this weekend. But you never know. He might throw it in for a possession or two. I know he's stubborn with a lot of things, which most great coaches are. But who knows? Maybe he throws it in for a possession or two just to see what their reaction is.
Yeah, it's going to be tough, man. He's done it a couple times in a couple possessions so far this year, but he's been very married to the idea that he prides himself in being a tough man-to-man. Like, that's what they do. Yeah. This is what we do. We play man-to-man. We're tough. We're physical. We guard. And I'm very, very concerned about how that's going to go against. Look, Gonzaga. They're like a surgeon out there. That's what Ryan Nembhard is. He's a surgeon. Yeah. And all they're going to do is they're going to put you into ball screens. And if you don't get one of the big guys rolling and sealing in the post, you're going to get Nembhard attacking the drop, and he's going to find somebody open for a shooter. He's going to pull up from 8 feet, and he's not going to he is so good at making the right decision out of a ball screen. I just don't know how you play man-to-man against them. When UConn's not a very good man-to-man team right now. There's a reason why they're outside the top 90 on KenPom in defensive efficiency. If I was on the UConn coaching staff, I think it would be keeping me up nights trying to figure out ways to slow down Ryan Nembhard right now.
Yeah, that's something that I've heard from opposing coaches when I prepare for broadcasts is like, hey, we got to get back in transition and take things away, right? Because Nembhard throws it up ahead or he probes with the dribble. But then we can't make that such a concerted emphasis that now we're out of position for drag screens in transition or that quick flow into Gonzaga's continuity ball screen. You have to be locked in from the second you take a shot on the offensive end for Gonzaga, because they'll get down the floor as quickly as possible. Even after a made basket, there's been times where it's quick inbounds and then an outlet down the floor, and they're scoring on you 3 seconds later. So you've got to be locked in. You've got to find ways to take away all of Gonzaga's easy baskets, and that starts in transition, locating the ball, and in particular Nembhard. But I'm right there with you. If I was coaching right now and I had to figure out how to stop Gonzaga's offense, it might be one of those things where, you know what, we're getting all 5 guys back, defensive transition, and, like it or don't like it with analytics these days, I'm going to dare them to shoot from 3-point line. Mm-hmm. They have good shooters, but they have a tendency to go hot and cold. I mean, I don't think they made a single three in the second half against Kentucky the other day. Khalif Battle can shoot it, but at times he can go cold. Nolan Hickman is hovering around 40% for his career, I believe, but he can go cold at times as well. And Nembhard, for as good as he is with all the other stuff, he's just a good shooter. He's not a great shooter. Gonzaga doesn't have a true, knockdown shooter like many of their great teams have had in the past, like a Kispert, a Richie Fromm, a Blake Stepp, any of those guys.
What is the one thing that you're the most worried about if you're Gonzaga when you're facing UConn? Like, as you're watching them from the outside, what's the thing that kind of worries you? What's the first thing on the scouting report, basically?
Well, I mean, you're talking about back-to-back champions, and I know the roster is really different, but you've got a huge piece back in Caravan. It's that champions mentality of we're going to win. Maybe it didn't come through in Maui, but it's ingrained in those guys every day in practice, with their drill work, with their skill work, with their practices of having that belief. And I think Danny Hurley has showed over the last few years that he's as good as anybody at getting teams to play to their potential. Now, teams from year to year, programs from year to year, you don't reach your potential in November or December as much as you would like. It's a gradual process. And so maybe this year's process getting to where they're ultimately going to be might be taking a little bit longer than they all would like and their fan base would like. But I wouldn't count them out in any way because they've got that champions mentality, and Danny Hurley is going to bring it out of them.
Yeah, I think that I've been saying this a lot on the pod that I do. You got to kind of buy into the idea that this is the next great crop of UConn guys, but you're looking at hopefully this March, but more likely next year kind of scenario with a lot of them. Like there's going to be a lot of pieces here where it's a learning curve. And Dan actually said something interesting the other day where he was like, I need to coach this team with a more positive mindset and I compare it to the last 2 years. It's been about perfecting what they are, right? It's been about making sure all of the details and everything is perfect. Whereas this year, you got to have more of a teacher's mentality where you're developing, where you're supporting, where you're at times their biggest cheerleader, even when they're making mistakes. You know what I mean? Like it's the aspect of building confidence and developing confidence in these kids and their ability to actually go out and play this game. And I think that some of that will result in mistakes getting made where it's not the same perfect level of basketball that you've seen. The one thing I really want to see in this matchup for UConn is Liam McNeely getting going. I think Caravan, like you just kind of know what he's going to be a 17 points, 9 boards. You're going to get a couple assists. He's going to make some blocks. He's going to have some steals. He's going to impact defensively. If he goes 4 for 6 from 3, he'll have 23. If he goes 1 for 6 from 3, then he'll have 15. It's going to be one of those performances. If Liam McNeely can get going and get you 20 and get you a couple assists and be the guy that kind of does the Cam Spencer stuff coming off of those ball screens where he can kind of facilitate a little bit, get to the rim if he needs to, I think he's a little bit of the X factor guy here for UConn. If he can get to the point where he looks like a lottery pick, then I think that takes UConn to another level.
Yeah, and he's got great size too. I mean, he's one of those, 6'7" wings that he can put the ball in the deck, make plays as you're talking about. A really good shooter. And so I agree with that. I think if UConn is going to maximize themselves over the course of the year, you're going to see a gradual progression in his game. And I'm not talking about a gradual progression of 6 points per game more scoring average. It's going to be the little things, the things that, a great coach like Danny Hurley is constantly, I'm sure, making guys aware of. Hey, where's our help side? Constantly on every possession, awareness of what the other team's running offensively so that you can bother it. Because McNeely's still a young player, and a lot of times it takes guys a little bit of time to get up to speed in regards to the secondary stuff. You'll see the scoring many times. You'll see the playmaking. You'll see that kind of stuff early in a career. But sometimes it takes a little bit of time for the light bulb to go off with the extra stuff, the recognition of what another team is doing and how you can slightly get them uncomfortable. And that's one reason I think you're seeing a lot of these coaches so active in the transfer portal about experience, because you take a kid as a freshman who's very talented, you're 19 years old, you haven't guarded thousands of sets at a high level, so where you can quickly recognize, oh, that might be a DHO to an elevator, or it might be a cross screen to a flare, whatever it might be. It's your first time seeing it, where if you got the experience guys, you're already in the right position. You're recognizing what it might become, and then you're quickly able to adjust to it. And so, that's a big picture college thing that I think if McNeely, and not just him, but some of these other freshmen across the country can pick up on quickly, you're going to see teams improve rapidly. I know this isn't a Duke-centric pod today, but that's one of the things that's scary about Duke, right? With that kind of stuff, and they're already, I think, first in defensive efficiency. I know they got Malawach on the interior, blocking everything, it seems like. But Knipple and Flag and some of these other young guys, this is their first time going through most of this. Once they get that second round of games in ACC and they start recognizing it, like, holy cow, this could be an all-time type of defensive level team in my eyes. It's crazy.
Yeah, they're really good, man. They are really, really good. And the funny part is Malawach is like, he's so good at the 5, and you can make the argument that Malik Brown, their backup 5, is actually the best defensive player that they have on.
Yeah.
They're so good defensively. They're going to put it all together. All right, let's see the moment of truth, Dan. Does Gonzaga go into the Garden, go into Store South, go into UConn's third home court, and pick up a victory here on Saturday night?
Yeah, I'm gonna have to ride with Gonzaga. I mean, you got a week off to prepare and clean up some of the things that bothered them. And I know, as we talked about, it was against their zone, and UConn's probably not going to do that. But it gets them a chance to think conceptually and work on some things. You got a week off. Granted, it's a long day of travel. You are in UConn's backyard, essentially, their second home. But I'm going to say Zags by 7.
Zags by 7. Okay. If this is what UConn has to do to win, okay, they have to stay out of foul trouble. Terrace Reed and Samson Johnson both have to give you 20 plus minutes where they're not in a situation where they're sitting on the bench with 2 fouls, right? Because Graham Ike, Braden Huff specifically, those two are very, very good at getting to the foul line and drawing fouls. You have to stay out of foul trouble. You have to find a way to be able to control Ryan Nembhard. You do those 2 things. You keep your bigs on the floor, and you keep Ryan Nembhard from slicing you up. It's not even as a score, right? Make sure that he doesn't sit there and just pick out passes like Aaron Rodgers dicing up a defense. If you can do those 2 things and then make shots offensively, then I think that you really have a chance to be able to win this game. Unfortunately, I don't think that they're going to be able to do that. I have not seen them yet this year be able to stay out of foul trouble, and I think Samson Johnson will have 2 fouls by the 18-minute mark of the first half, and then Terrace Reed will have 2 fouls by the under 12 time. Like, they've had such an issue with foul trouble, and Graham Ike is so good at getting people into foul trouble. So that's my concern. If they are able to stay out of foul trouble, UConn will have a very real chance to win this game. If they can't, they're going to be in a lot of trouble. So that's where I'm at with it.
Good breakdown. I agree with you on the Ike putting Johnson and then Terrace Reed in foul prone opportunities, because that's a big part of what Gonzaga does. They set that tone early physically, and if you're out of position, you're going to get whistled for a foul. And I think it's excuse me, end of the day, it's going to be a great game. It's going to be a great environment. Unfortunately, it's not 2 top 5 teams like I think we were all thinking it was going to be 3 weeks ago. But it's still great for college basketball in regards that 2 of the best programs over the last 7-8 years or so, and 2 programs that have good history against each other, going all the way back to Gonzaga's first Elite 8 run where UConn knocked them off, eventually won the title. So, big time game. I'm sure it's going to be a big time environment. Are you going to the game at MSG this weekend?
I will not be up there. I was trying to make it work, but it's going to be too complicated to be able to do after dark, uh, and be able to go to the game. There's weird rules with Madison Square Garden where you cannot be in the facility 2 hours after the end of the press conferences, and after dark won't end until more than 2 hours afterwards if I was doing it live from up there. So it just made it complicated to be able to get up there. But I will say this: on Saturday, listen to this slate, Dan. We have Memphis at Clemson at 11 a.m., Texas A&M Purdue at noon, Ohio State Auburn at 1, Xavier Cincinnati at 2, UCLA Arizona at 3. You have Louisville Kentucky at 5. You have Tennessee Illinois at 5:30. You have Marquette at Dayton at 7, and you have UConn and Gonzaga at 8 o'clock as the nightcap for an absolutely ridiculous day of college basketball. I can't wait, man. Bring it on.
Yeah.
Doesn't get much
Well,
better
we
than
thought
that.
there was a lot of movement in the polls last week. I mean, just
Oh,
those
just
games
wait.
you're talking about, like literally, there's going to be a lot of movement in the polls come next Monday morning as well. So the one that I like in that, granted, I'm a West Coast guy, so UCLA Arizona's got some interest for me, but Xavier Cincinnati always seems to bring the fireworks, especially now that Sean Miller's back at Xavier. That should be a one to track, that's for sure.
Yeah, hopefully we don't have a brawl like we did a couple of years ago, but there's a reason why they call that the crosstown shootout, man. That's a healthy rivalry is probably the politically correct way to say it. Dan, great to see you, man. I think on Saturday night we're gonna have about 2 hours where we're ending these, but it's always good to see you. Always good to talk to each other.